Linda could outrun me even at 62. That's what I kept thinking as I stood in the community center on a gray November morning in Seattle, staring at her photograph surrounded by white lilies. My little sister, who'd beaten me in every race we'd ever run as kids growing up in Tacoma, who still hiked Mount Rainier twice a year, who taught American history to high school juniors with more energy than teachers half her age. Dead of heart failure, they said. Just like that. I didn't believe it then. I believe it even less now. For 60 years, Linda had been my anchor. When our parents died in a car accident when I was 23 and she was 19, I became more than her brother. I became her protector. I walked her down the aisle when she married her first husband, Tom, held her hand through his cancer, and celebrated with her when she married Greg Morrison 5 years ago. I thought I'd done my job. I thought she was safe. The memorial service was exactly what Linda would have wanted. Small, intimate, no fuss. About 40 people clustered in groups, speaking in hushed tones. Her colleagues from Roosevelt High School formed one circle, sharing stories about her legendary pop quizzes and the way she made the Constitutional Convention sound like the most exciting event in human history. Emily, my 19-year-old niece, stood near the front, her face pale and hollow. She'd flown in from the University of Colorado 3 days ago and hadn't stopped crying since. Greg played his part perfectly. The grieving husband in a dark suit, accepting condolences with just the right mix of dignity and devastation. He'd been a contractor when Linda met him, charming and handsome with silver hair and an easy smile. He'd renovated her kitchen, then won her heart. I'd thought he made her happy. I'd thought he was one of the good ones. I'd been wrong before, but never about something that mattered this much. Robert. I turned to find Dr. Sarah Patel standing slightly apart from the crowd, Linda's physician for 15 years. Sarah looked professional as always in a navy dress, but her dark eyes held something I couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or fear. Sarah, thank you for coming. Could we speak privately for a moment? Her voice was barely above a whisper. It's important. Something in her tone made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I glanced toward Greg, who was deep in conversation with Linda's principal, then followed Sarah into a small side room used for storage. She closed the door carefully. Linda asked me to give you this if anything happened to her. Sarah pulled a manila envelope from her purse. It was sealed, my name written across the front in Linda's distinctive handwriting. She gave it to me 3 weeks ago. I thought she was being overly cautious, maybe even a little paranoid. But now, my hands shook as I took it. What do you mean, if anything happened? She had heart failure. You said her heart just gave out. That's what the death certificate says. Sarah's professional mask cracked slightly. Robert, Linda was one of the healthiest patients I've ever had. Perfect blood pressure, no family history of heart disease. Cholesterol numbers most 30-year-olds would envy. When she came to see me 6 months ago complaining of fatigue and dizziness, I ran every test I could think of. Everything came back normal, but the symptoms kept getting worse. Why didn't you tell me? She asked me not to. She said she didn't want to worry you until she knew what was going on. Sarah glanced at the door. 3 weeks ago, she came in looking terrible. She'd lost 15 pounds, was having chest pains, muscle weakness. I wanted to hospitalize her immediately, but she refused. Instead, she gave me that envelope and made me promise to give it to you if she died suddenly. I thought she was being dramatic. Heart failure at 62 seemed impossible. But here we are. I stared at the envelope in my hands. Did you do an autopsy? Greg declined. Said Linda wouldn't have wanted her body desecrated. Sarah's jaw tightened. But Robert, I kept blood samples from her last visit. I always do for patients with unusual presentations. They're stored at the lab under her medical research consent. If you need them, don't let anyone destroy those samples, I said quietly. Whatever you do, don't let them disappear. After Sarah left, I sat alone in that storage room for 10 minutes, turning the envelope over in my hands. Through the door, I could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of coffee cups, the sound of my niece crying. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a letter in Linda's handwriting and a small key. Robert, the letter began. If you're reading this, then I was right and I'm gone. I've kept this from you because I needed to be sure, and because I didn't want to put you in danger too. But now you need to know everything. The key is to my safety deposit box at Pacific Northwest Bank, Box 247. Inside, you'll find my journal from the past 6 months and a thumb drive. I've documented everything. Please protect Emily. Don't let Greg anywhere near her trust fund. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I love you, little brother. You were always my hero. Now be hers. Linda. I read it 3 times, each time feeling ice spread further through my veins. Then I carefully folded it, put it back in the envelope, and walked back into the memorial service. Greg was standing next to Emily now, his hand on her shoulder in what looked like a comforting gesture. When he saw me, he gave me a sad smile. I smiled back, slipping the envelope into my inside jacket pocket, and I started planning. The bank opened at 9 the next morning. I was there at 8:45, Linda's key burning a hole in my pocket. I'd spent the night in my old house in Fremont, the same house where I'd raised my own 2 kids after my divorce 20 years ago. Not sleeping, not eating, just thinking about my sister's final message. The safety deposit box was small, but what was inside changed everything. A leather journal with Linda's name embossed on the cover and a small red thumb drive. I took both to a private viewing room and started reading. The first entry was dated 6 months ago, April 15th. Started feeling dizzy this morning. Greg insisted I drink the special smoothie he made. It had a strange aftertaste, almost metallic. Probably nothing, but I'm going to start keeping track. I turned the page, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. April 18th. Dizzy again. Greg very attentive, making all my meals now. Says he wants to take care of me. April 25th. Threw up twice today. Greg suggested I see Dr. Patel, but also gave me herbal supplements to try first. Emily called from college. Greg answered my phone and told her I was sleeping, that I'd been stressed and needed rest. I heard him, but I was too weak to get up. May 2nd. Noticed Greg has been researching heart medications online. Asked him why. He said he was worried about me. Wanted to understand what might be wrong. So caring. But something feels off. The entries continued, getting shorter as Linda got weaker, but more detailed about Greg's behavior. She documented every meal he prepared, every supplement he gave her, every time he discouraged her from seeing friends or calling me. She noted how he'd slowly taken over her finances to reduce her stress, how he'd convinced her to make him co-trustee of Emily's college fund just in case something happened. The last entry was dated 3 weeks ago. I know now. Found printouts in Greg's office about digitalis toxicity symptoms. Every symptom I've had. It mimics heart failure perfectly. He's been putting it in my morning coffee. I can taste it now that I know what to look for. I'm going to Dr. Patel tomorrow to give Robert the envelope. I've set up auto-forwarding emails that will send him everything if I don't cancel them each week. The thumb drive has recordings. I've been recording our conversations for the past month. I have proof. But I'm so tired, so weak. I don't know if I can fight much longer. If you're reading this, Robert, please stop him before he hurts Emily too. The trust fund is worth $500,000 from her father's life insurance. Greg thinks I don't know he's drowning in gambling debts. I found the statements from the casino. He needs money desperately. Don't let him get it. I love you. I sat in that small room and cried for the first time since I was a boy. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place I didn't know existed. My little sister, my Linda, had spent her last months being slowly murdered by a man she'd trusted, and she'd faced it alone because she was trying to protect me. When I could breathe again, I plugged the thumb drive into the bank's computer. The first video was dated May 28th. Linda was sitting in her bedroom, the window behind her showing her garden in full bloom. She looked thin, her skin pale, but her eyes were sharp. Robert, if you're watching this, it means I didn't make it. I need you to know everything. She took a shaky breath. Greg has been poisoning me with digitalis, a heart medication. He grows foxglove plants in the garden. Claims they're just pretty flowers. They're the natural source of digitalis. I've been documenting everything, but I need you to understand why I didn't go to the police. She held up a document, 3 months ago, Greg convinced me to sign over power of attorney to him. He said it was just for medical decisions if something happened. I was feeling so sick, I signed, without reading carefully. But it's comprehensive. He can make financial decisions for me too. And he's already started. He's the co-trustee on Emily's fund now. If I go to the police and I'm wrong, I destroy my marriage over paranoia. If I go and I'm right but can't prove it fast enough, he could clean out everything before they stop him. Emily's entire future, gone. Linda leaned closer to the camera. So I'm doing this the smart way. I'm documenting everything. This thumb drive will auto-send to your email if I don't reset it every week. My journal has details. Dr. Patel has blood samples that should show the poison, and I've been pretending not to notice. Drinking the coffee he brings me, taking the supplements, while secretly recording our conversations. I need him to feel safe, to let his guard down, to say something incriminating. The next several videos were recordings of conversations. In one, Greg was on the phone in his office, not realizing Linda had hidden her phone on a bookshelf. I know, but the old bag is taking longer than I thought. Greg's voice, tired and frustrated. The digitalis should have worked by now. But she's strong. It's fine. Once she's gone, I'll have access to everything. The house, the pension, and once I'm Emily's legal guardian, that trust fund, $500,000 pays off Vegas and then some. Another voice, a man. You better hope this works, Morrison. You owe some serious people serious money. It'll work. Heart failure is easy to fake if you know what you're doing. No one suspects the grieving husband. I watched 5 more videos, each one worse than the last. Greg researching symptoms. Greg on the phone with his bookie. Greg carefully crushing foxglove leaves and adding them to a coffee pot. And in the final video, dated 2 days before Linda died, her face gaunt and exhausted. He's increasing the dose. I can feel it. I'm getting weaker. I tried to stop drinking the coffee, but he noticed and got suspicious. I have to keep playing along. Robert, I'm scared. But I need you to use this. Save Emily. Make sure he pays for what he's done. I'm setting the auto-send to trigger if I don't reset it for 3 days. I love you. Tell Emily I love her. And tell her I'm sorry I couldn't hold on. The video ended. The screen went black, and I sat there, in that climate-controlled room, in a Seattle bank, and felt something cold and hard settle into place where my heart used to be. Greg Morrison had killed my sister. Slowly, methodically, painfully. And he thought he was going to get away with it. He was wrong. I made copies of everything. The journal, the videos, the recordings. I put the originals back in the safety deposit box and called my lawyer, James Crawford, a bulldog of a man who'd handled my divorce and my father's estate. James, I need you to listen very carefully, I said, standing in the bank parking lot. My sister was murdered. I have proof. But I need your help to make sure her daughter is protected before we go to the police. An hour later, we were in his office downtown, reviewing everything. James, 68 and sharp as a tack, watched the videos without expression, read the journal entries, listened to the audio recordings. When he finished, he sat back in his leather chair. This is solid, Robert. Very solid. But you're right to be cautious. If Greg suspects anything before we move, he could drain accounts, disappear, or worse, hurt Emily. He pulled out a legal pad. Here's what we do. Emily is 19, legally an adult. The trust fund can only be accessed with trustee approval until she's 25. But we can petition for emergency removal of Greg as co-trustee based on conflict of interest. I'll file that tomorrow. Won't that tip him off? Not if we do it quietly through probate court. It'll take a few days to process. In the meantime, we need to make sure Emily is safe. James leaned forward. Where is she now? With Greg. At Linda's house. The thought made me sick. Get her out of there. Tell her you want her to stay with you. That you're worried about her being in the house with all of Linda's things. Make it sound natural. I called Emily from James's office. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with tears. Uncle Robert? Hey, sweetheart. How are you holding up? Not great. This house is so quiet without Mom. Greg's being really nice, but I miss her so much. I know, honey. Listen, I was thinking, why don't you come stay with me for a few days? I've got your mom's old room all set up. We can go through her things together when you're ready. I think we could both use the company. There was a pause. Greg said, I should probably stay here to help sort through Mom's affairs. He's been explaining the financial stuff to me. Every muscle in my body tensed. What financial stuff? You know, the house, the insurance. He said Mom made him in charge of everything, including my trust fund, to make things easier. He said we'd sit down this week and figure out a budget for my college expenses. Emily, I kept my voice calm. Pack a bag. I'm coming to get you right now. Tell Greg, I insisted. Uncle Robert, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just need to see you. Please, sweetheart. Humor your old uncle. 30 minutes later, I pulled up to Linda's house in Queen Anne. It was a beautiful craftsman she and Tom had bought 20 years ago, worth over $1 million now in Seattle's insane housing market. Greg answered the door, that same pleasant smile on his face. Robert, good to see you. Emily's just finishing packing. He gestured me inside. She told me you wanted her to stay with you for a few days. I think that's a wonderful idea. She needs family right now. I stood in Linda's entryway, looking at this man who'd murdered my sister, and I smiled back. I appreciate you taking such good care of her. Of course. Linda would have wanted it. He lowered his voice. Actually, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk to you about Emily's financial situation. Linda made me co-trustee of her trust fund, and I think we should sit down together and make a plan for her education expenses. That's thoughtful of you, but there's no rush. Well, actually, there is a bit of urgency. Greg led me into Linda's living room, where I'd spent countless Sundays having dinner, watching football, arguing about politics. Linda had some debts I wasn't aware of. Credit cards, mostly. About $40,000. We need to settle those from the estate before distributing assets. I thought we could use some of Emily's trust fund to cover it, then replenish it from the house sale. Linda had $40,000 in credit card debt? I kept my voice neutral. Apparently. I was shocked too. She must have been stressed about money and didn't want to worry anyone. Greg shook his head sadly. I found the statements in her office. I can show you if you'd like. That won't be necessary, because I knew exactly what those statements would show. Greg's name, Greg's charges, Greg's gambling debts, transferred onto Linda's card sometime in the past few months, while he had power of attorney. Let's table that discussion for now. We're all still grieving. Emily came downstairs with a small suitcase. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she managed a small smile when she saw me. Ready, Uncle Robert. I hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, the same brand Linda had used. Ready. In the car, Emily was quiet for a long time. Finally, as we crossed the Aurora Bridge, she spoke. Uncle Robert, there's something weird I need to tell you. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What is it, honey? Last week, before Mom died, I came home for a surprise visit. I wanted to see her because she'd sounded so tired on the phone. When I got to the house, Greg said she was sleeping and I should come back later. But I heard her voice upstairs, and she sounded scared. She was saying something like, I know what you're doing, and then Greg went up there and closed the door. When I asked him about it later, he said Mom had been having nightmares because of her medication. Did you believe him? Emily turned to look at me, and I saw Linda in her eyes. Smart, suspicious, brave. No, I didn't. Uncle Robert, what's going on? I pulled over into a QFC parking lot and turned to face my niece. Emily, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Of course. Your mom didn't die of natural causes. She was murdered, and I have proof. For the next hour, sitting in that grocery store parking lot, while shoppers walked past with their carts and their ordinary lives, I told Emily everything. I showed her Linda's letter, played her the videos on my phone. I watched her face cycle through disbelief, horror, rage, and finally, a cold determination that reminded me so much of her mother it hurt. That son of a bitch, she whispered when I finished. That evil son of a bitch killed my mom for money? Yes. And he's trying to get access to your trust fund, too. That's why we need to be smart about this. Emily wiped her eyes roughly. What's the plan? Over the next 3 days, we built our case with James's help. He filed for emergency removal of Greg as co-trustee, citing potential conflict of interest and fiscal mismanagement. He subpoenaed Linda's medical records and requested Dr. Patel's blood samples be tested for digitalis. And he contacted the Seattle Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit about potential elder abuse and fraud. But we all knew the real evidence was in the videos and recordings. The question was how to use them without tipping Greg off before we had Emily's finances secured and Linda's remains protected. The answer came from Emily herself. I should go back, she said on the third night, sitting in my kitchen over pizza. Greg thinks I trust him. Let me use that. Absolutely not. The words came out harsher than I intended. I'm not putting you in danger. I'm not a kid, Uncle Robert. I'm 19. And Mom died protecting me. The least I can do is help finish what she started. Emily leaned forward, her voice steady. Greg wants to meet about the trust fund. Let's meet. But this time, I'll be recording, just like Mom did. If I can get him to say anything about the credit card debts, about accessing my money, it adds to the evidence. James, who'd stopped by to update us on the court filings, nodded slowly. She's right. And if we do this in my office, with proper security, there's no danger. I'll be right outside the conference room. Robert can be watching via camera. If anything feels off, we end it immediately. I don't like this. Neither do I, James admitted. But Emily's an adult, and she has the right to protect her own interests. This could seal the case. Emily reached across the table and took my hand. Uncle Robert, let me do this. For Mom. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon at James's office. Greg arrived at 2 p.m., wearing an expensive suit I was pretty sure Linda had paid for. James greeted him professionally, led him to a conference room, and offered coffee. Emily should be here shortly, James said smoothly. She's just parking. Can I get you anything while you wait? I'm fine, thanks. James left, and upstairs in his private office, Emily and I watched on a monitor as Greg sat in the conference room, checking his phone. Emily was wearing a wire, a tiny microphone clipped to her bra strap that would record everything. James had insisted on the precaution. You don't have to do this, I said one last time. Yes, I do. Emily squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked out. I watched on the monitor as she entered the conference room. Greg stood, arms open for a hug, but Emily stayed near the door. Hi, Greg. If he noticed her coolness, he didn't show it. Emily, sweetheart, how are you holding up? Okay, I guess. Uncle Robert said you wanted to discuss the trust fund? Yes, please, sit down. Greg gestured to a chair across from him. Emily sat, her posture stiff. I know this is difficult to talk about so soon after losing your mother, but we need to address some financial realities. What kind of realities? Greg pulled out a folder. I recognized it as one from Linda's home office. Your mother had some debts we weren't aware of. Credit cards, mostly. About $40,000. Since I'm the executor of her estate and co-trustee of your fund, I think the best solution is to settle these debts from your trust temporarily, then replenish the funds when we sell the house. Emily looked at the papers he slid across the table. These credit cards are in my mother's name, but the charges are all from the past 3 months. She was really sick during that time. How did she rack up $40,000 in 3 months? Medical expenses, probably. You know how healthcare costs are. I thought she had insurance through the school district. She did, but there are always out-of-pocket costs. Greg's smile didn't waver, but I could see tension in his jaw. The point is, we need to handle this. I'll need you to sign some paperwork authorizing the transfer. Can I see the actual credit card statements? Like, what the charges were for? I don't have them with me, but I can email them to you later. Because my mom was really careful with money. She taught me to budget when I was 12. $40,000. Seems like a lot for someone who balanced her checkbook every week. Emily leaned forward. Greg, were these your charges? The room went very still. Excuse me? You had power of attorney over Mom in her final months. Did you use her credit cards for your expenses? Greg's pleasant mask slipped slightly. Emily, I'm trying to help you. Your mother wanted you to be taken care of. Then why did she tell Dr. Patel she was afraid of you? She was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly. Was she sick, or was she being poisoned? Greg stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. You're obviously upset and making wild accusations. Am I? Emily stood too, and I could hear the steel in her voice. Linda's steel, because I've been thinking about how Mom got sick, how it happened right after you married her and got added to her accounts, how she told me you were making all her food, giving her supplements, how you were so insistent she stay home, not see doctors, not talk to Uncle Robert. Your mother had heart failure. Did she? Or did you give her something to make it look that way? Greg's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. I loved your mother. You loved her $500,000 trust fund for me. You loved her $1 million house. You loved her pension. Emily's voice was shaking now, but with rage, not fear. What you didn't love was waiting for her to die naturally. So you helped it along. You have no proof of any of this. Don't I? Greg stared at her for a long moment. Then he moved toward the door. I'm leaving. When you've calmed down and can be rational, we'll discuss this like adults. We're discussing it now, with police. The conference room door opened, but it wasn't James who walked in. It was Detective Maria Gonzalez of the Seattle Police Department, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Gregory Morrison, you're under arrest for the murder of Linda Morrison and fraud. Detective Gonzalez began reading his rights as one officer moved to handcuff him. Greg's face went white. This is insane. You can't prove anything. We have recorded conversations where you discussed poisoning your wife. We have video evidence of you crushing foxglove leaves. We have journal entries documenting your abuse. And we have blood samples showing lethal levels of digitalis in Linda Morrison's system from 3 weeks before her death. Detective Gonzalez's voice was flat, professional. We can prove everything, Mr. Morrison. I watched on the monitor as they let him out, still protesting, still denying. Emily stood frozen in the conference room until James and I rushed in. Then she collapsed into my arms, shaking. It's over, I whispered into her hair. It's over, sweetheart. You did it. Your mom would be so proud. The next 3 weeks were a blur of police statements, legal proceedings, and media attention. Seattle loves a good true crime story. And Greg Morrison's case had everything. A seemingly perfect husband, a slow poisoning, a daughter's trust fund. The local news ran it for days. Dr. Patel's blood samples proved crucial. The toxicology tests showed digitalis levels high enough to cause Linda's heart failure, levels that increased over the 6 months Linda had documented in her journal. Greg's lawyer tried to argue accidental ingestion from the garden, but the prosecution had the recordings of Greg admitting to the poisoning. The credit card investigation revealed Greg had been forging Linda's signature for months, racking up gambling debts at Snoqualmie Casino and using her cards to pay them. He'd been planning to use Emily's trust fund to cover the trail, then probably disappear once the house sold. In January, 4 months after Linda's death, Greg Morrison was convicted of first-degree murder and multiple counts of fraud. The judge sentenced him to life without parole, plus 20 years for the financial crimes. Emily sat next to me in the courtroom, holding my hand as the verdict was read. She didn't cry. She just nodded once, like she was checking something off a list. Mom would want us to go to Snoqualmie Falls now, she said quietly as we left the courthouse. She always said that's where she felt closest to peace. So we drove up to the falls, on a clear February afternoon, just the 2 of us. We stood on the viewing platform, watching the water crash down 268 feet, sending up spray that caught the winter sunlight and turned it into rainbows. I miss her every day, Emily said. So do I. But I'm glad she was smart, glad she documented everything, glad she didn't just let him win. Emily turned to me, and again I saw Linda in her fierce expression. I'm going to finish college. I'm going to become a lawyer, I think. Help other people who are being abused, manipulated, controlled. Turn what happened to Mom into something that helps others. I pulled her into a hug. Your mom would love that. I know. And Uncle Robert? Thank you for not giving up. For believing the evidence even when it was crazy. for protecting me like you always protected her. We stayed at the falls until sunset, talking about Linda, sharing memories, her terrible karaoke singing, her legendary Thanksgiving stuffing, the way she could make any historical event sound like the most dramatic thing that ever happened, the way she'd fought, even while dying, to protect her daughter. I learned something in those months after Linda's death. I learned that evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like a charming contractor with an easy smile. Sometimes it looks like a loving husband making smoothies for his wife. Sometimes it looks like care and concern, while hiding cruelty and greed. But I also learned that love is stronger than evil. Linda's love for Emily, her foresight and courage in documenting everything even as she was dying, her determination to protect her daughter from beyond the grave, that love won in the end. And I learned to never ignore my instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. When someone tries to isolate you from your family, that's a red flag. When anyone seems too eager to control finances, to make medical decisions, to insert themselves into positions of power over vulnerable people, trust your gut. I visit Linda's grave every week now. It's in Lakeview Cemetery on Capitol Hill, not far from Bruce Lee's headstone. Emily comes with me when she's home from college. We bring fresh flowers and tell Linda about our lives, about Emily's classes, about the nephew she never got to see grow up properly, but who turned out brave and strong just like her. And sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees just right, I swear I can hear my little sister's laugh. The way it sounded when we were kids racing through our backyard in Tacoma, before the world got complicated, before evil men in nice suits tried to steal her life. I couldn't save her, but I could finish what she started. I could make sure her murderer paid. I could protect her daughter. That's what brothers do. That's what family means. And that's why I'll never stop telling her story, warning others, making sure that Greg Morrison's name is remembered not as a grieving husband, but as exactly what he was, a murderer who underestimated the strength of the woman he married and the family who loved her. Linda Chen died on November 8th at age 62, but her love, her courage, and her determination to protect her daughter will live forever.